Cactus Wells, Arizona Territory, 1887. Every man in 3 counties had tried his luck with Adeline Sinclair since the Santa Fe Railroad brought her west. And every man in 3 counties had walked away with nothing to show for it but a polite smile and a full stomach. Though not one of them had ever managed to make her laugh the way the drummers all claimed they had, boasting to each other over cards long after she'd forgotten their names entirely. Garrett Cole had watched it happen a dozen times from his usual stool at the counter. Drummers, ranch hands, even a mining engineer with more money than sense, all of them circling the new Harvey girl like she was the only interesting thing that had happened to Cactus Wells in a decade, which she likely was. She was quick with an order and quicker with a comeback, red hair pinned up under her black bow in a way that never quite stayed as tidy as the matron wanted. And she turned down every last one of them without so much as raising her voice, sending each man back to his table with his pride mostly intact and his hopes thoroughly dashed. He'd finished his coffee, set down 2 bits, and found her out back by the corral instead, untying her apron in the last light of evening, her horse-drawn wagon already loaded for the ride back to the dormitory. The desert sky gone orange and pink behind the mountains at her back. "You're too beautiful to be alone, Miss Sinclair," Garrett said, plain as he said most things, leaning against the fence rail with his hat pushed back. No flattery dressing up the words, just a plain fact stated the way he'd state the weather. Addie felt the heat come up her neck before she could stop it. The same heat she'd been keeping carefully banked around every other man who'd tried some version of that line on her over the last 8 months. "Then choose me," she said, and heard her own voice come out steadier than she felt, surprised at herself for saying it at all, out loud, in front of God and the corral and half the depot within earshot. Adeline Sinclair had been engaged once, back in Ohio, to a banker's son named Charles Whitmore, who'd courted her for 2 years before breaking it off 3 weeks before the wedding, the moment a wealthier family's daughter became available and made better sense for his father's business. She'd been 22, humiliated in front of a whole church congregation that had already gathered for the wedding rehearsal. And she'd spent the following year watching her own reputation shrink in a town too small to let her start over in it. Neighbors who'd once envied her engagement began treating her with pity reserved for women whose prospects had visibly narrowed. And her own mother had started, gently but persistently, suggesting she consider men she'd have refused outright 2 years earlier. When the Fred Harvey Company posted a notice recruiting young women of good character to work the new railroad restaurants springing up across the Southwest, Addie had answered it within the week, drawn less by the wage, decent as it was, than by the plain fact that Arizona Territory was 2,000 miles from anyone who knew Charles Whitmore's name. What the company offered, without ever quite saying so in those words, was something rare for an unmarried woman in 1887, a wage that belonged to her alone, earned by her own labor, at a time when most of the options available to a woman without means still ran, one way or another, through some man's decision. The Harvey girls were by then already something of an institution along the Santa Fe line, trained in service and etiquette, housed in supervised dormitories, and bound by a strict contract Addie had read twice before signing. A uniform kept spotless at all times, and an agreement not to marry for the length of her first year of service, on pain of forfeiting her final month's wages and her return fare east. Buried in the same paragraph, in print no smaller than the rest, sat a single line allowing early release for marriage with good cause and proper notice to the company. A clause Addie had read carefully, filed away, and decided, at the time, she would never have occasion to use. Mrs. Agnes Cartwright, who managed the Cactus Wells Harvey house with the discipline of a woman who'd buried a husband and raised 4 sons alone, enforced the marriage restriction more strictly than any other clause in the contract. Having watched too many promising girls throw over a good position for a cowboy's promise that didn't survive the first hard winter, Addie had signed anyway, and spent 8 months since proving to herself, more than to anyone else, that she didn't need a man's promise to build a life worth having. Garrett Cole was 29, ran a modest but well-regarded spread 8 miles outside town, and had watched half the eligible bachelors in the county make fools of themselves over Addie Sinclair without once joining the line himself. It wasn't that he hadn't noticed her. Every man in Cactus Wells had noticed her within a week of her arrival. Red hair and quick wit and a knack for setting down a coffee cup like she was daring you to say something interesting enough to earn her attention. It was that Garrett had learned, watching from a distance, that Addie turned away every man who tried to win her with flattery stacked on flattery. Promises made before they'd earned the right to make them. Compliments aimed less at her and more at whatever picture of himself the man was trying to build in her eyes. He'd lost his own mother young, raised largely by an older sister who taught him that the surest way to lose a woman's respect was to talk more than you meant. He'd built his ranch slow and careful over 6 years, working the land his father had left him into something worth staying for, and had decided, watching Addie deflect suitor after suitor with the same practiced ease, that a woman that guarded hadn't gotten that way over nothing, that some story sat behind that guardedness, worth understanding, before he tried to compete for her attention at all. He didn't ask around town about her past. He simply started coming into the Harvey house 3 mornings a week instead of 1. Always polite, never pushing, ordering his coffee and reading his newspaper and leaving a fair tip, until Addie found herself, against her better judgment, looking forward to the mornings he came in, counting them without quite admitting to herself that she was counting anything at all. "Then choose me," Addie had said, and immediately wished she could take the boldness back, though not the words themselves. Garrett didn't look surprised so much as pleased, the corner of his mouth working toward a smile he was clearly trying not to let loose all the way. "That's a bigger answer than I was expecting for a first compliment," he said, genuinely. "You've been coming in 3 mornings a week for a month, Mr. Cole," Addie said. "I don't think either of us is pretending this is a first compliment." "Fair enough," he said quietly. "Why me? You've turned down better-dressed men with bigger ranches, men who could offer you considerably more than I've got sitting 8 miles outside town. Because you're the only one who's never once told me what I should want," Addie said. "Every other man in this county spent the last 8 months telling me how lucky I'd be to have him. You're the first one who's asked instead of announced, and I've had enough of men who arrive already certain of the answer before I've said a single word." Garrett considered that, turning his hat brim slowly in his hands. "I've got a contract to compete with, I'm told," he said. "Whole year unmarried, or you lose your wages and your way home." "You've been asking around," Addie said, though without much heat in it, more curious than accusing. "Didn't have to," Garrett said. "Mrs. Cartwright makes sure every man in this town knows the rule before he gets past the front step. I expect she's saved a good number of you girls a broken heart over the years, protecting that clause as hard as she does." Addie looked at him a long moment, surprised again by how plainly he said things other men dressed up in flattery. 11 more months, she said, quietly. "That's what's left on my contract, though there's a clause that allows early release for good cause. I've never had reason to think much on it. Then I reckon I've got a long stretch ahead of me to become a good enough cause," Garrett said, and tipped his hat, and left her standing by the corral, turning that sentence over for the whole ride back to the dormitory. He kept coming, 3 mornings a week, exactly as steady as he'd been before the corral conversation. never once pushing past what Addie had already told him her contract required. Mrs. Cartwright noticed everything that happened under her roof. As a matter of course, the extra minute Addie spent refilling Garrett's coffee, the fact that she'd started arriving at work with her hair pinned a shade more carefully than the uniform strictly demanded. Small changes that would have gone unnoticed by anyone paying less attention than a woman who'd spent decades reading exactly this kind of quiet shift in the girls under her care. "He's patient," Mrs. Cartwright said one morning. Not quite a warning, not quite approval either, watching Garrett through the pass-through window as he folded his newspaper. "Patient men are either the best kind or the most dangerous kind, in my experience. Takes a while to know which." "Which was your husband?" Addie asked, more boldly than she'd meant to. "Both at different times," Mrs. Cartwright said, and didn't elaborate further, though something in her face suggested the answer had cost her something to give honestly. Garrett brought Addie a small bundle of wildflowers, the 6th week, picked from his own north pasture, careful to hand them over the counter in full view of Mrs. Cartwright and half the dining room, rather than trying for any private moment that might look like he was working around the rules instead of respecting them. "Not courting," he said, when Addie raised an eyebrow at the flowers. "Just flowers. A man can bring flowers to a woman he admires without breaking any contract I've heard of." This story's already found its way to places I never imagined when I sat down to write it. Brazil, Nigeria, India, the Philippines, corners of the world I'm only starting to learn the names of. If Addie and Garrett are keeping you good company tonight, a like helps more than you know. Tell me where you're watching from. I read every comment. Now, the regional supervisor is due in Cactus Wells within the week, and a certain wealthy customer has been asking Mrs. Cartwright more questions about Addie's schedule than any coffee order requires. Addie told Garrett the rest of it on a Sunday walk. The one afternoon a week, Mrs. Cartwright allowed the girls off the property entirely, chaperoned by nothing but the small town's general watchfulness. "Charles didn't just leave me," she said. "He left me 3 weeks before the wedding, after the invitations were sent, after half of Millbrook had already bought their good clothes for the occasion. I had to sit in that church and watch people's faces when they realized what had happened. I've never been more humiliated in my life, and I swore I'd never again build my whole future on a man's promise that could be undone that easily." "That's not what I'm offering you at all," Garrett said. "I know that in my head," Addie said, "but 8 months of this contract have been the first 8 months of my life where nobody's future depended on whether a man kept his word to me. I earn my own wage. I answer to Mrs. Cartwright and nobody else. Every dollar I've saved this year is mine because I earned it, not because a husband decided to let me keep it. I don't know how to want something that puts me back in a position where a man's choice could undo everything again." Garrett was quiet a moment, walking beside her past the edge of town, where the desert opened up gold and endless toward the mountains, the afternoon heat still holding despite the hour. "I can't promise you I'll never disappoint you," he said finally. "Nobody honest could promise that. What I can tell you is I've watched my own father keep every hard promise he ever made to my mother, right up until the day she died. And I've spent 6 years building something solid enough that a woman wouldn't have to gamble her whole future on hoping I meant what I said. I'd rather earn your trust slow than ask you to hand it over on faith." "That's the most patient answer anyone's ever given me so far," Addie said. "I intend to keep proving it, whether or not it ends the way I'm hoping it does," Garrett said. He told her the rest of his own reasoning 2 weeks later, sitting on the porch of the Harvey house during the slow hour between the lunch and dinner trains. "I was engaged once too," he said, without preamble. 3 years back. She decided ranch life wasn't the future she wanted, and I don't fault her for it. Better she said so before the wedding than after. But I spent a long while after that telling myself I'd rather build a ranch alone than risk hearing that answer twice. Kept myself busy enough with cattle and fence lines that I mostly managed to believe it. What changed? Addie asked, watching him closely. You did, Garrett said, plain as anything. Watching you turn away every man in this county who tried to win you with promises instead of patience. I recognize something in that. You were protecting the same thing I was, just from a different direction. I figured a woman careful enough to guard herself that well was exactly the kind of woman worth being patient for. Addie looked at him for a long moment, the desert heat starting to ease as the afternoon wore toward evening, the light going soft and gold the way it always did at that hour in Cactus Wells. Mrs. Cartwright mentioned the regional supervisors coming through Friday, she said. Unannounced inspections usually. She seemed uneasy about it in a way I haven't seen from her before. Anything you need to be uneasy about? Garrett asked. I don't know yet, Addie said. I suppose we'll find out Friday. The regional supervisor, a precise man named Mr. Holloway, who traveled the line inspecting every Harvey house twice a year, arrived Friday afternoon with a ledger under his arm, and a manner that made clear he considered rumor as worthy of investigation as any account book. He'd heard talk, he told Mrs. Cartwright within earshot of half the dining room, of a Harvey girl receiving regular attention from a particular rancher. Attention frequent enough, some townsfolk had mentioned, to raise questions about whether the conduct standards of the position were being properly maintained. Mrs. Cartwright, to her credit, answered him with the same brisk composure she brought to every dispute under her roof, insisting firmly there'd been no impropriety of any kind, though Addie could see the strain the conversation was costing her. Addie was still absorbing that when Reginald Ashby, a mine owner who'd been dining at the Harvey house with increasing frequency for a month and had twice hinted at intentions Addie had twice deflected, rose from his table with the confidence of a man who'd been waiting for precisely this opening. Mr. Holloway, Ashby said, loud enough for the room, I'd like to resolve any question of impropriety directly. I'm prepared to offer Miss Sinclair marriage this afternoon, with your blessing and the company's, which would settle the matter of her contract cleanly and put an end to any talk of scandal. The dining room had gone entirely quiet, every fork stilled, every face turned toward Addie, who understood, standing there in her apron, with Mr. Holloway's ledger open and waiting, that she was being offered a tidy, respectable solution to a problem she hadn't asked anyone to solve on her behalf. Addie reached for the serving bell on the counter, the same bell she rang a dozen times a day to call orders and clear tables, and rang it once hard, until every last conversation in the room had fully stopped, until even the cook in the back kitchen had gone quiet. I'd like the room's attention for exactly as long as it takes to say this once, she said, and found her voice steadier than she'd expected. Mr. Ashby, I thank you for the offer, but I've declined your attentions twice already, and a third time in front of an audience doesn't change my answer. I'm not marrying to settle a rumor, and I'm certainly not marrying a man because it happens to be convenient for a supervisor's ledger. She turned to Mr. Holloway directly, meeting his eyes without flinching, aware of every face in the room turned toward her, but no longer minding it. There's a clause in my contract, sir, allowing early release for marriage with good cause and proper notice. I read it the week I signed. I've never had reason to use it because I've never met a man worth using it for, until recently. If there's talk in this town about Garrett Cole's visits, it's because he's spent 2 months proving himself patient and honest in full view of this entire dining room, never once asking me to break a single rule of my contract. That's not scandal, Mr. Holloway. That's exactly the kind of good cause the company wrote that clause to allow for. Mr. Holloway, who had clearly expected tears or embarrassment rather than a woman ringing a bell to command a room, closed his ledger slowly, studying her a moment as though reassessing something. "Well," he said, "I suppose that answers the inquiry more thoroughly than I anticipated." Ashby sat back down without another word at all, his ears red, and the dining room, after a beat of stunned silence, returned to its lunch as though the entire scene had simply been an unusually loud order for pie. Addie found Garrett at his ranch 2 days later, mending fence as he always seemed to be doing whenever she came looking for him, working with the same steady patience he brought to everything he touched. "I made something of a scene at the Harvey house Friday," she said. "I heard," Garrett said, setting down the wire cutters. "Whole county's heard by now, I expect. Mrs. Cartwright's version already had you facing down 3 supervisors instead of 1, last I heard it told. I told a room full of strangers I'd never met a man worth using my release cause for. Until recently," Addie said. "I think it's high time I said that part to you directly, instead of to a supervisor with a ledger." Garrett crossed the distance between them. "You're too beautiful to be alone," he said, echoing his own words from the corral. "I meant it the first evening, and I've meant it every one of the 2 months since, 3 mornings a week, whether or not you'd noticed I was counting." "I noticed," Addie said. "I think I noticed before I let myself admit it, if I'm being honest with you, the way you've always been honest with me." "Then choose me," Garrett said, handing her own words back to her, gently. "Properly this time, not by a corral in the last light of an ordinary evening. However you'd like to say it, I'm choosing you," Addie said simply, and found the words cost her nothing at all to say. Not anymore, not standing here in the last of the afternoon light, with fence wire still cool in his hands. "I'm giving proper notice, right here, right now. Same clause, same cause, same man I've been counting mornings for, without admitting it either. They married in November, at the small chapel behind the depot, with Mrs. Cartwright standing witness, and the entire dining room staff of the Harvey house closing the counter for the afternoon. Mr. Holloway's own approval arriving by telegram a full week ahead of the wedding, breathed and businesslike, wishing the couple well. Addie's early release went through exactly as the clause had always promised, and she left the Harvey house with her final wages paid in full, and a reference letter that mentioned, with what Addie suspected was genuine admiration, her composure under difficult circumstances. Mrs. Cartwright hosted a small supper for her the night before she left the dormitory for good. The other girls all gathered around, insisting on hearing the Bell story one more time, though every one of them had already heard it a dozen times over. She moved to Garrett's ranch that winter and found within the first month that building a home with a patient man felt entirely unlike the fear she'd carried west from Ohio. Not a gamble on a promise that could be undone, but something built the same unhurried way Garrett mended fence, one check section at a time, never rushed. She kept her own small ledger of the ranch's accounts, a habit Garrett encouraged rather than discouraged, understanding without needing to be told that a woman who'd once lost everything to another person's decision would always want a hand on her own finances. Mrs. Cartwright visited every few months after that, always bringing a new Harvey girl along for the ride, making a quiet habit of showing the newest arrivals the ranch where one of her girls had run a bell in front of a supervisor and a rival suitor and married exactly who she'd meant to. Garrett kept the story of that afternoon told at supper for years afterward, though he always let Addie tell the ending herself. The part where she'd stopped waiting for someone else to solve her own problem, picked up a bell she'd rung 1,000 times for other people's orders, and used it, once, to call a room to silence for her own. You know what gets me about this one? Addie didn't win that dining room with a speech she'd rehearsed. She won it with a bell she picked up out of habit, because ringing it to get a room's attention was the one skill 8 months of serving strangers had already taught her, without her ever meaning it as anything more than a job. When the moment came to speak for herself, she reached for the tool she already knew how to use, the same one she'd used 1,000 times to call other people's orders. I think that's true of most of us, more often than we'd guess. The courage doesn't usually arrive as something new. It arrives as something ordinary we already carry, picked up one more time for a reason that finally matters enough. Garrett never had to compete with Reginald Ashby's money or Mr. Holloway's ledger. He just had to keep showing up 3 mornings a week, patient enough, long enough, that when Addie finally needed to choose, there was no real choosing left to do at all. Only a thing she'd already known for weeks, finally said plainly out loud, "Thank you, truly, for riding with me today. Until next time, friend, keep riding."